In this video, we're going to take a look at a couple of systems that tells us information about the chemicals and products that we are using in our labs. So those systems are WHMIS, which stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, and HHPS, which stands for Hazardous Household Product System. So we're going to look at the basics of both. We're going to also look at the symbols they use and how the two systems differ. So let's just jump right into it. And we're going to start with WHMIS. And so WHMIS, like I said, it stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. It is an information system that's set up to protect all workers and employees. And so it really, what it does is it provides employers and workers information about the hazardous materials they work with on the job. And there's three kind of key parts to WHMIS. First is what we used to call the materials safety data sheet. It's now just called the safety data sheet, or SDS. And what we do with that is we typically have that on hand. It's stored separately from the material and gives you information about how to handle emergencies, how to clean up if you spill it, and all sorts of wonderful safety information about the product. From there, the second part involves labels. And so these labels are applied directly on the container that has the material in it. And it supplies the basics, like the really vital warning information, and has some symbols on it too, which we're going to take a look at in a minute, that we can use to identify some of the safety hazards. And finally, the last sort of part of WHMIS is worker education. So employers must provide instruction to each worker on how to use WHMIS. For example, as a teacher, I do WHMIS training every single year. So I am very well versed in WHMIS. Now, WHMIS does have all of these symbols, and there's sort of these key symbols here. So these are our Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, or WHMIS symbols. The first one that kind of looks like a canister is actually for compressed gas. The one below it that has an O with flames around it is for oxidizing material. The one below that that looks like a T with an exclamation mark is materials causing other toxic effects. Below that, we've got corrosive materials. So that looks like chemicals spilling on hands or on tables and getting eaten away. From there, on the next column, we've got flammable and combustible material, which is just the flame. We've then got the skull and crossbones, which is materials that can cause immediate and serious toxic effects. So they are nasty. Below that, we've got biohazardous infectious materials. And then finally, we've got below that the R with the little test tube in there and it kind of exploding. That means it's dangerously reactive materials. So you should become well acquainted with all 8 of these symbols because they are found on all of the different chemicals that we deal with in the lab. All right, so let's talk now about hazardous household product symbols, or the HHPS system. Not all products are controlled by WHMIS, and so these products are typically called consumer products and they contain hazard symbols. So they have these HHPS symbols, which consist of both a shape and a picture. And so the shapes that they use are either a hexagon, which represents danger, a diamond, which represents warning, or an upside down triangle, which represents caution. There's kind of 4 key pictures that we end up seeing on these HHPS labels, and you've probably seen them before. If you look at any sort of chemical that you have in your home, they probably have these symbols. The first one is the hand that turns into a skeleton going into a liquid. That means it's corrosive. It eats or wears away at other materials. Your one that looks like something exploding means it's explosive, and so it can explode or give off deadly vapors. The one with the flames means it's flammable, so it ignites if exposed to heat or sparks. And finally, you've got your poisonous, which is your skull and crossbones, very similar to the same kind of one we saw in Wemyss labeling that can cause sickness or death if swallowed. So that's a quick summary of Wemyss and HHPS, the symbols that they use, and how they differ. So let's move on to the next test now, and we'll get some practice with our symbols.